Sensory avoiders, they're trying to avoid unpleasantness in their body. They're trying to avoid feeling bad, like these textures, the dirt, the food, the wetness. It feels bad. So why would they want to do it? They go to extremes often to avoid it, or they get really upset when they encounter it. And they're often perceived as controlling or stubborn or strong willed because they put down their foot and they are not doing this because it feels so bad in their body or because maybe they're seeming anxious about it. We see a lot of anxiety come in around sensory information because they are trying to avoid having these bad feelings. But they're not trying to be difficult. They're just trying to regulate themselves. So much of the time, they can't even control it before it happens because that fight or flight response turns on because our senses' main job in the world is to protect us.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life in marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I am so excited for today's guest because I wish I knew about what she does way sooner, like 7 years ago. Okay. So today we're going to be tackling how we can know that our kids have sensory challenges. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I have experience with this because my 7-year-old is someone who struggles with sensory overload. Okay. So he has sensory processing disorder. And I only recently learned about this last year. But looking back, I'm like, okay, there were definitely signs. I just didn't know. And so I thought, why not have a pediatric occupational therapist come on and teach us what the signs are so that if you are struggling with a kid or multiple kids of yours who might have sensory challenges, this could be the episode for you to determine, oh my gosh, we can help. There is something that we could do about this. And it's not just you. Okay. So, hi, Samantha. I'm so glad that you're on the show. Thank you for coming to share all your expertise and helping my listeners learn more about what's going on if they do have kids that are struggling with sensory issues.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe you just found out about sensory processing issues a year ago. That was definitely something missed that should have been figured out by healthcare providers way earlier on. So I am so excited to be here today and help parents kind of figure this out earlier on their journey because it probably left you a lot of time struggling that you could have been making progress.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we always thought that, okay, he's a little more difficult than, your average kid, but I don't know what it is. But yeah, share with you more later into this episode, like how that unfolded, because it was very like by chance that we discovered it. And I feel like there's a lot more parents like me than there are people who know about this. So that's why I needed to have you on this show as soon as I learned that you were a pediatric occupational therapist. So before we dive in, let me introduce you to Samantha so you know who she is, what she's about. Okay, so Dr. Samantha Goldman, by the way, she's expecting. Okay, like as we're recording today, she's 2 weeks out from her due date. I'm so excited for her. And her kid is going to have such a phenomenal parent because the fact that all these things as a pediatric occupational therapist, you have the tools at your disposal, which is so awesome. Today, she's a pediatric occupational and feeding therapist whose mission is to help parents finally understand sensory processing, how to support their child's unique needs, and navigate those tough but inevitable moments with confidence. As a neurodiversity affirming occupational therapist, she believes that sensory challenges are not the fault of the child or the parent, but rather a mismatch between the world and your child's personal sensory needs. And when you finally understand and learn what's going on in your child's unique body, that's where the magic happens. And life becomes less chaotic and a lot more fun. And I can attest to this, okay? I struggle so hard with my son. I love him so, so much. And it's like, why are you so difficult? I often had that thought. Why can't you just be like the other kids? I never said this. Okay. I knew enough to not say that. But I often thought it. And then once I discovered that he had sensory issues, I was like, I am such a shitty mom. Oh my God. Like this whole time you were struggling and I didn't know it. And I was like totally judging you for not being how I wished you were. But really, you needed help. And I'm sure a lot of parents can empathize with that thought process as soon as they discover what's going on. But hi, welcome to the show. Tell us, where do you live? And how did you get started on this path of coaching?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say you are definitely not alone. That is like one of the number one things I've heard from parents. And then that mind blowing moment of, oh my gosh, there is something else kind of going on here. So, not alone at all in that. But I am in Boca Raton, Florida. So, we moved down here about, I guess, 7 years ago now. Originally from Florida, but we moved around a lot. And when it comes to OT, that wasn't my plan. I was planning to go to med school. And as I got into kind of those classes and I was talking to my parents, I realized that I really wasn't excited about being a true doctor, like medical doctor, having to make those really tough medical decisions about people's lives, maybe doing surgery. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and somebody came over to me and they said, I think you'd really like pediatric occupational therapy. They're like, I feel like you're a really good fit for this. And I had talked to the dean of the college, and when she explained it and explained the way that you help families navigate through really tough, challenging moments and come out on the other side and come out stronger. And even in the hospital, same thing. You're working with families who kind of having the toughest moments of their lives, but we get to be the people who helps their kids sit up for the first time. We get to be the people who help their kid have their first bottle and really just have these amazing moments. It just totally sounded up my alley and never looked back.
That's amazing. Now, if I have listeners out there who are just like me and they're like, occupational therapy, what is that? Can you explain what your specific field does and how and who it helps?
Yeah, so I will say that is also one of the most commonly asked questions I get. When I used to work in the actual hospital system, I would go into a room and the parents would be like, my child doesn't have a job. Like we don't need occupational therapy. Like, no, it's not about that. So when it comes to OT, our job is to help people do the things they need to do and they want to do in their life on a daily basis. We call these our occupations, and that's where occupational therapy comes from. Now, it's so broad. There are so many different areas that it encompasses, but I'm going to focus on a kid because that's, of course, what we're here chatting about. So when it comes to a child, we're talking about being able to eat, being able to get dressed, being able to go to school, focus in school, do work, being able to go to gymnastics and keep up in their gymnastics class. So the things that we want to and need to do on a daily basis make up our occupations. And so that is our big focus, is participation in life, right? We want kids to be able to fully and happily engage with their families, their friends in life.
And that has made such a huge difference for my son. Like, truly, he's a completely different person, just attending appointments with an OT for a year. Like, when we first started, he had such low frustration tolerance, would become nonverbal when he was upset, and he was easily upset, and he would spiral, and it was like, there's nothing we could do. It was overwhelming for us. He was overwhelmed, and we're just like, you don't know what to do. We don't know when it's going to happen. It was kind of like just the luck of the draw. And he would struggle with keeping up with writing in school because the dexterity just wasn't there. He didn't know how to skip for some reason, like his brain struggled with that. And now he's able to communicate better when he's upset. He's able to self soothe a lot easier. Also, we know how to support him through that. And he's getting better at keeping up with class. He can skip. He like asked to get rollerblades and a skateboard. And we're like, who are you? He's truly now exhibiting more age appropriate behaviors. And it's just so exciting. And then not to mention the feeding issues. That's still a work in progress, but back then it's like he wouldn't even try anything new. It seemed like the list of foods that he liked kept shrinking over time. And I was so concerned about how he would do when he started first grade. She just started this last fall because that meant staying in school for lunch. Whereas kindergarten, it was half day. And I was like, I don't know what you're going to eat. I don't know what you're going to do. And it was such like, it was causing me anxiety. And I'm so glad that I even found out that there was feeding therapy because our medical doctors were saying, oh, he just has anxiety. I'm like, I know. I mean, yeah, he might have anxiety, but also I think there's other stuff going on. And I just love how occupational therapy is like a very like holistic approach. Again, like just the reflexes, oh my gosh, it's so magical.
Yeah, it is really amazing when you actually get down into it. And I kind of love that about OT too, is that it is really holistic. So when you come in for an evaluation, we're not just looking at these like this and that. Like, we're digging deep, right? We're going into how does their body move? How does their sensory system work? How are their fine motor skills? Kind of like you were mentioning. What exactly is going on from head to toe to emotions to regulation and making sure that we're not missing anything. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused about OT too, is they're like, okay, you're telling me OT's job is occupations and what we do in daily life, but how does that connect to fine motor skills and sensory? And those are always the skills that we're looking at to see how they impact us on a daily basis. And so I love what you're saying that, yeah, we get really down into there and we want to know the root of what is going on and working there with kids and in a way that's pleasurable. So when a kid comes to OT, like it should be fun. We want them to enjoy it. We want to be the favorite discipline, right? We want them to enjoy coming to us.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I was so amazed by the setup of the office that we go to. I'm like, this is like a play gym. Like everything is a game and it's so cool. And I truly think that just by like taking him and staying through every appointment and just observing what they were doing, it was helping me become a better parent because I was taking things way too seriously. And I'm like, oh, I should start talking like that, or I can try doing that. And, this is cool. And it gave me the vocabulary and understanding of what's going on inside rather than just looking at like what I see. I'm like, oh, you're not listening. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. What is going on? And so that has been really cool. So what are some signs that people can look out for to help them understand whether their child truly is struggling with sensory processing?
Yeah, so the first thing I need everybody to know is that we actually have 8 sensory systems, not 5 like we all learned in school. We kind of have these 3 hidden senses nobody talks about, and they're our proprioceptive sense, so our sense of body awareness. So I know if I close my eyes and I raise my hand, I can sense that my hand is right here. We also have our vestibular sense, which is our sense of head and body movement. So when we're on a swing and you can feel yourself swinging, that's our vestibular sense. And our interoceptive sense, which is our sense of tripping over my words here, of what's going on inside our body. That's how we feel our emotions. It's how we know if we need to go to the bathroom, or when our stomach rumbles, we know we're hungry. So when it comes to signs, there are signs within every single one of our sensory systems. So I could list them out forever and just go through every sense, but I will kind of say the most common ones that we see. So getting really dirty and messy is like a hard time with that. So the hands, I already do it because I see them. The hands come up when they get messy and they can't handle maybe getting wet, brushing our teeth, getting dressed, those hard times with textures, food textures. On the other hand, they also might really want to be dirty all the time. They might like really tight clothing. They might love being wet and running through water and having a hard time stopping doing those things. For our sensory seekers, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on in a little bit, kids who love sensory information, we often see them having a hard time sitting still. So a lot of times these kids are pegged as the kind of the troublemakers in the classroom because their body physically cannot sit still. They need movement. Maybe they also use their hands on other people a little bit more than we would like. So a lot of pushing, shoving, throwing, or on the other side, they don't want to be touched. They don't want to be pushed. They don't want to be shoved. Which of course, none of us really want to, but they have an extreme kind of reaction to it. And then the ones that I would say get missed the most, and you kind of touched on these a little bit, is having a hard time with kind of what we call motor plans. So planning out movements in our head and completing them. So things like being able to write our letters, things like following along in gymnastics class. So we'll often see they can't coordinate jumping jacks, falling behind in something like gymnastics or karate, and kind of having that overall body awareness is not there. So seeming very clumsy, walking into things, falling over their feet. So it was a very lengthy answer to your question.
No, they're all so good because we might just dismiss them and be like, oh, that's just them. Or they have, ADHD and it's probably related, right? But there are so many ways that I feel like we are typecasting kids based on their behaviors and not realizing that they can be brought up to more socially acceptable, I guess is a term, right? Because like my son, he struggled with a lot of that stuff. He used to not like us to hug him. And I'm like, oh, this is so sad. Do you love me? And he actually still struggles with saying, I love you. He literally cannot say that phrase for whatever reason. He can say the words in different situations, but he can't say I love you. So even when we say I love you, he'll go, uh-huh. Or he'll like put up the sign language sign for I love you, but he literally cannot. Something is stopping him from saying it. But now he loves cuddling. He loves hugs. He gives me kisses and he lets me kiss Ted. I'm like, before I could only kiss the swirl on his head, nowhere else, nowhere on his skin, because he's sensory avoidant. And so just by attending OT, he's been able to work through things and almost like desensitize the sensitivity of his sensory issues. And yeah, it's been life-changing. But I will say, for the parent who is new to this or is about to embark on this, it can be very overwhelming in the beginning. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, yes, it is so overwhelming at the beginning, even as an OT. And I think when you and I first connected, we kind of talked about that I had read a lot of the OT books coming in, and I found them as an OT super overwhelming to even understand or read what was going on. And I think I love OT. I love what we do, but I do sometimes think that our healthcare system isn't as supportive as I would love it to be. And you go to OT and you start to learn about these things, right? Maybe somebody tells you your child has like sensory issues or points that there's something going on, but then it feels like there's so much to learn, right? And nobody really explains it to you. And I have to say, you've done a fabulous job of educating yourself, and your therapist has done a fabulous job of educating you. Because when you talk about your son and what you guys have done, I am like blown away at how all encompassing you have really covered it. But for so many parents, they might not have the time at their therapy. So like when I was working in a hospital, I was only getting 30 minutes to see my parents. Yeah, from the time I pick them up in the waiting room to the time I walk them back, take off their shoes, do a sensory activity, do a fine motor activity or a body work activity, put the shoes back on, and we're out. And it just didn't leave the time to teach parents what they really needed to learn. So it does feel so overwhelming, but I will say just taking that one step at a time, just learning one little thing, one more thing, when it starts to connect, I mean, it's truly magic. When it starts to connect and you have those light bulb moments, you start to view your child differently and you're able to connect with them finally after all these years, kind of like you said, of feeling like, oh, why is this so difficult? Or, the one I hear a lot from parents that kind of the unsaid thing that they never want to say to somebody is, you know, sometimes like I dread the end of the day picking them up from school because it's just so hard. But when you actually finally understand what's going on and understand how you can support them, so much changes.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we have toddlers and we have to be just like very aware of what they prefer, what works well for them, and really individualizing how we raise our kids. I feel like as a parent, it's much easier to just be like, okay, this is just how I parent. But every kid is different, as I'm sure you've noticed with your clients. And yes, it's all on us as parents to do that. And it's exhausting, right? But I find that putting in that extra effort in the beginning really helps set us up for success because now we have a roadmap. Now we understand more what's going on behind the scenes in that he's not trying to make our life difficult. He is not trying to be difficult. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I feel like kids with sensory issues, with ADHD, any neurodivergent kid, it's really easy to be like, stop being so difficult. Why are you so stubborn? Why are you so strong-willed? Why can't you just listen? And it creates this power struggle. And also, it's not so great to hear all from their perspective, right? It blows their self-esteem, like way off. So can you talk a little bit more about what's going on there?
Yeah, that is my soapbox. I will say, calling a child difficult, strong willed, stubborn, something that happens so common, right? And it typically, I will say, it actually happens the most with our sensory avoiders. So, because they feel so strongly, like, let's talk a little bit about what a sensory avoider is so I can actually explain that. But essentially, they perceive sensory information more than we do. So while I'm feeling kind of, I feel my hair on my face, and this doesn't really bother me, I don't really notice it's there. A sensory avoider might feel so much of it and it just feels too much immediately. So it pushes past where they can handle it really quick. And so our sensory avoiders, they're trying to avoid unpleasantness in their body. They're trying to avoid feeling bad, right? Like these textures, the dirt, the food, the wetness, it feels bad. So why would they want to do it? Now, they go to extremes often to avoid it, or they get really upset when they encounter it. And so they're often perceived as controlling or stubborn or strong-willed because they put down their foot and they are not doing this because it feels so bad in their body or because maybe they're seeming a little bit anxious about it too, right? Like we see a lot of anxiety come in around sensory information because they are trying to avoid what is on their body, trying to avoid having these bad feelings. But they're not trying to be difficult. They're just trying to regulate themselves. They're trying to protect themselves. And that fight or flight response, it turns on, it kicks in, it is biological. So a lot of the times we're blaming kids and we're saying, why are you being so difficult? Why are you fighting with me at the table? Why are you throwing this across the room? So much of the time, they can't even control it before it happens because that fight or flight response turns on because our senses' main job in the world is to protect us. Number one, our senses' main job is to sense when we have a spider crawling up our arm. It's to sense when a car horn honks at us. So I turn and look to keep us safe. Its job is to keep us safe, and they are just responding to that. Not at all them trying to be difficult.
Yeah, and it's pretty challenging when my 3-year-old is just trying to sing and they're in the car together singing next to each other and he's like, I'm like, okay, like there's this word is like, okay, you can't be controlling, but yeah, like, okay, can you sing quieter? But now we've gotten to the point where we just keep like headphones in the car. It's like, okay, if you don't want to listen to her, you can put those on. Just teaching him boundaries and knowing that it's not so much controlling other people, it's about what you want to stick around for or not, right? And it's just so like interesting now that we know, because otherwise we're like, chill out. Okay, like all she's doing is singing, she's enjoying herself. Why are you making such a big problem over it? But no, he's literally struggling.
Yeah, it
And
literally hurts.
it hurts, yeah. And Like, just going in the movie theater, he has to wear headphones because it's so loud, but he wants to watch it, right? And so we just have to do things a little differently to help him be able to participate as well. And it's just so funny because, like, him going to OT helped us realize how many sensory issues we have and that everybody has sensory issues, just different, degrees of sensitivity. And it's just been such a fascinating experience.
And it always seems too like you have two opposites in the family. So you'll have somebody who is loving sensory information, loves to make noise, loves to get dirty. And then on the other hand, you have a sensory avoider who it's really overwhelming for. So I love that you're teaching him strategies, right? Of how can I manage my own body and how can I respond to this in a way that's both appropriate, because a lot of the times there are really big emotions, really big reactions. So we want to provide them more appropriate ways to respond and ways to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I want him to have great relationships. And if he's not taught how to regulate his emotions, how to respond appropriately while also supporting himself, no one's gonna want to be his friend or even want to date him. And I'm just like, as a parent, we worry about what their future might look like. And I want him to have fulfilling relationships. So I'm so glad that I just like stumbled upon OT because literally did not really let go. He's got anxiety, and that's why he's got issues with eating. And it just so happened that my friend saw on Facebook someone said, "Oh, I take my kid to feeding therapy." And I was just like, "Wait, what? What's feeding therapy? Oh my gosh!" And I just started Googling, and I somehow landed on sensory processing disorder. I must have been like typing in all his behaviors, and I was like, I just went down the rabbit hole. I'm like, this is him. And I was like, wait, is he autistic? Like, totally fine if he is, but it'd be nice to know what we're working with here. And turns out he's not. He just has sensory processing disorder. But I'm like, wow, just having a label. And I'm not saying like we're going to label him, but just knowing, like, we have to put words into our experience of him and what he's going through was such a game changer.
It really does. Once you kind of learn about sensory processing and you learn kind of the different types. So there are so many different types of sensory processing too. And I think that's really important to point out that most of the time we don't even talk about these different types. But when you learn that, you start to read these things and you start to, I have a whole like video course on it. And I have parents who call me and they say, or email me and they'll say, I feel like I was like reading or watching about my child. And you see those light bulb moments and it really just changes your trajectory and changes how you connect with your child. And I think that's the most important.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that because I do think that um, going through occupational therapy has allowed for me to connect with him a lot better because we're more supportive. We know how to support him. We are able to understand him better and not like just be quick to react and shut him down or like make him fall in line, right? So, what are some easy ways for parents to connect with their kids who are overstimulated?
Yeah, the single best way to start connecting with them is to learn about sensory processing and to learn about specifically their unique sensory system. So, a lot of times parents get really frustrated because they're like, why aren't these general parenting strategies working? Like, I'm following all these people on social media, I am trying the reels, I am trying these things, and it blows up in my face. And a lot of the times it's because it doesn't work for a sensational child, right? Like it does not work the same way. Or maybe they have a different type of sensory need. But until you actually learn about your own child's body, it's very hard to kind of get there and understand that. So, from there, what I will say is when I talk about connecting with the child, it's about supporting their specific needs and understanding that they might have different needs than you expected them to, or they might have different needs than yours, and kind of figuring out how to bridge those two. So, a lot of the times I'll have sensory seekers, so kids who love sensory information, where the parent tends to want to avoid sensory input. And so that's a challenging one, right? A kid who loves to scream and a parent who, when their child screams or whines, they feel their fight or flight response kick in. And so thinking about, okay, where can I meet my kid in the middle here? How do I bridge this gap? So I have a lot of parents who love loop headphones right now because they'll put the headphones in. And if their child is banging on drums or doing something really loud, they're not shutting down, right? They're able to still connect with them and to still bridge that gap.
Oh my gosh, that's like our oldest. Our oldest is ADHD. And yeah, he's sensory seeking, whereas both my husband and I are sensory avoidant. So is our middle child. And it's like, oh my God. It's so triggering. Like, but I know he's just being himself, and I don't ever want to tell him not to be himself, but also like I'm struggling here. I can't listen to any more of this stuff. And he's always gotta like chew on something, whether it's like lifesavers or gum or ice, like something. Like, okay. It's so fascinating to know that, oh, he's just doing his thing. He's fulfilling a need that he's experiencing. And because my husband and I couldn't relate to it, we're just like, why do you do? I don't get it.
But the cool thing is when you actually give him those opportunities to do it, which it sounds like you guys do an amazing job of, his body's able to stay more regulated. We're working on getting our bodies more regulated as the adults. But then when you're both more regulated, that's when you can have fun together, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love this so much. So tell me more about those courses that you have. What type of topics do you tackle in these courses so that parents know whether they need it, what it helps with, all the things?
Yeah. So again, my big thing is sensory processing and feeding. So in my mini courses, right now I'm focusing my mini courses on sensory processing. So I have one called Understanding Sensory Challenges that literally teaches parents all about the different sensory profiles. My main goal is to teach parents these things without all of the big jargon and words in ways that we can understand. So that's one of my mini courses. The other one is called The Hidden Senses, and it teaches us about those three senses that nobody ever talks about, but I swear to you, they cause so much chaos behind the scene when nobody knows about them. When they're not causing issues for kids, we don't really need to think about them, which is why nobody talks about it. But when they do cause issues, that proprioceptive sense, the vestibular sense, the interoceptive sense, they sound like big words, but they're really important and really important for us to help parents understand. And then I also have a membership called the Sensory Toolbox. And in there, I include all my mini courses, but I also help parents with kind of the whole spectrum of occupational therapy. We're adding things about fine motor skills. We're adding sensory guides for the dentist and the doctor this year. We do food play activities, and I have an entire section on breaking down mealtime battles and how to help kids increase their food variety while having fun.
Amazing. So would you say that there's a specific age group that your videos are best for?
I would say 3+. When it comes to sensory and the sensory system, I think that works for anybody. Whether you are, a baby, a toddler, all the way up to adults, I think you could use that for both. But when it comes to the food activities, I will say I have a toddler specific training, and then I also have a training on how to help older kids, but not in the baby arena.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. I just knew I had to have you as soon as I found out what you did. I was like, okay, these conversations need to be more plentiful because there are parents out there who have zero idea. Like I said, like my child is, turning 8 this year and we just figured it out. And I wish we knew this earlier because looking back, there were definitely a lot of signs. Like the fact that he came out pretty much scowling, like we thought he hated us, right? We're like, well, you make eye contact, so you're not autistic. So I don't know what it is, but why are you such a grumpy little old man all of the time? But really, he was just really uncomfortable with a lot of stuff that was going on. And so if you love what you heard and you want to learn more from Samantha, where can they find you? Where is the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so the best place is my website, so drsamgoldman.com. And then if you go there, my first place that I recommend starting is with one of my freebies. So I do have a self-regulation guide. So it's a self-regulation guide for the over or understimulated child. And I think it's just such an easy checklist for how to get started on this journey.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. I might have to check out your feeding course.
Yes, you're always welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I'm wishing you a smooth labor and delivery.
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited for you and your family and your little one to have you as their parent. But before I let you go, I love to ask my guests a question so listeners can get to know you better. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So I have been super into Love is Blind lately. That is one of my favorite trashy TV shows. What's your favorite trashy TV show?
Oh my gosh. So it's so funny because I used to watch a ton of kind of like reality TV, trash TV. And then my husband always made me feel so like, kind of bad about it, right?
Oh,
And then we went on a trip and he got sick, he got COVID at the time, and he was home for a week. And I came downstairs and he was watching reality TV. And I was like, what are you watching? And he was watching Below Deck. Little did I know, he's been watching this for years behind my back, not telling me. So we started watching it together, and I am obsessed with Below Deck. We've watched all the seasons now. We're going back to like season 1, but that is definitely my trashy TV show that we are loving.
I never heard of that show before. What is it?
Oh, it's like all about the yachty world, like all about working on a yacht and
Okay.
having all these big clients and that life of living at sea for 6 weeks.
Okay.
I just love the drama. That's not my drama.
Yeah. Right? I know. At times when I'm watching these relationship shows, I'm like, I feel so good about our marriage.
It makes you feel really good about the problems you're not experiencing.
1000%. Well, thank you so much again. I loved our conversation. If you love this, please go check her out. Go check out her website. Go check out her courses. Let her know you found her from this episode. And let us know what your favorite takeaway was and if this has helped you. Okay? I will catch you back here on the next episode. Bye, everyone. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.